In this third and final video on Napoleonic historiography, I want to consider how we might adapt the issues that we discussed in the first two videos for the purposes of writing an essay in the history extension paper for question 2, which is focusing on the case study. One of the things that you remember we've discussed is that this part of the exam really asks and often asks you to focus on the changing interpretations. So there's a sense in which you actually have to discuss the debate over time and quite broadly as well as specifically and in depth. And this is very tricky. So I want to use the ideas that we've developed so far and think about some strategies that you might employ that will allow you to do what we've just suggested. Firstly, let's review quickly what we suggested in video 1, and that was that there are, video 2 I should say, 4 rough phases to Napoleonic historiography running from his ascension to power as first consul in 1799 through to roughly the bicentenary of the Battle of Waterloo in 2015. Suggested that there are basically 4 phases to the historiography. And I'm not suggesting that this is watertight, but I'm suggesting it might be a good guide to begin thinking about the debate as a whole. And what I'm suggesting is that you'll need in the essay, if you're going to develop a thorough essay, you're going to need to basically write about something from each of these areas. So for example, let's consider, what if you left off one? What would your essay look like? If you didn't discuss phase 1 and you began discussing the historiography from 1840, you've missed a lot of important historiography here in the form of Napoleon himself, the memorial developed by Emmanuel de Las Casas. You miss Madame de Staël, you miss Chateaubriand, you miss all of the other people who were commenting around Napoleon's life about his rule. If you left off phase 4, then you are basically missing what the syllabus suggests in that you need to be discussing recent historiography. If you miss either phase 2 or 3, you're missing huge developments in the history of this debate. You miss the French historiography that we've discussed in the form of Adolphe Thiers and Jules Barni. This debate that rages while France is, in a sense, experiencing all sorts of difficulties. The Prussian invasion during the Franco-Prussian War in 1870-71, the Kaiser Wilhelm Germany's invasion in 1914, Hitler's invasion in 1939-1940. So you miss many of these basic themes about French power and the considerations that many historians brought therefore to Napoleonic history. In phase 3, if you miss this, you miss all of the Marxist, feminist, social history that we've been discussing in class. So my point is that it's important that you develop some strategy for writing about the entirety of the debate and something within each. Now, it might mean that, for example, you discuss a couple of, in one paragraph perhaps, depending on the question and depending on your preparation, you might discuss one paragraph that reflects this phase. You might then discuss one paragraph on one of the historians here, and a second paragraph on a second historian in phase 2. You might then discuss the social and cultural histories of this phase in 2 paragraphs, and you might discuss this in 1 paragraph. So there you've got 4, 5, 6 paragraphs of an essay, but they all join up to cover the debate as a whole. Okay, so that's an important point. You're reflecting the whole and you're reflecting the parts. So one way of visually representing this might be to look at that period in a different way. Let's remove the 4 phases for a second and just suggest that if we look at Napoleonic history from the same period, we're going to see that there are stacks of interpretations, each of which has its own unique expression in the debate about Napoleon's influence on France and Europe. So take each of these yellow dots as an interpretation. Could be a book, could be a historian, could be a film, who cares? But we've got all of these different interpretations. There is no way that you can write about each of them. But you need to show that you understand the debate as a whole. So what I'm suggesting is that you'll need to select a range of historians from across the entire period who allow you to discuss and show the dynamics of the debate running across that 200-year period. Now, it's entirely up to you, I think, who you choose to do this, but the ones that we've developed on the notes for on the table as a class that I've put on Edmodo for everyone, would be a good place to start. Why? Because they reflect a range over time, and they also reflect a range of different views, both positive, negative. They also discuss different themes like women and working classes, as well as the empire as a whole. So I think it's important that you go to that table and you begin to develop your own comfortable sense of how the debate is working, and then you select some historians that you are prepared to discuss in an exam depending on the question that you're asked. So in summary, important point is that your discussion in a question 2 essay for history extension has to reflect the whole, but it also has to analyze critically some historians in some detail.